Could you briefly sketch your project?
The project that I led was in Qatar, in the Middle East, and it was a complex project integrated between upstream and downstream facilities, built by more than 52,000 workers, and having an onshore plant with 12 big sub-projects in themselves.
What were the most serious complexities that you faced?
There are, of course, many complexities with this scale of a project. And one of the big complexities was, of course, that we had 12 sub-projects with many thousands of interfaces between those teams and the projects that they were leading. And also, of course, the complexity of having 52,000 people coming to your site, and also the interferences, for example, with the community. And also, you had to bring through global procurement many goods and materials, and you had to arrange your logistics to make sure that everything was safely brought onto the site. These are just some of them.
How did these complexities, how did they change over the lifetime of the project?
You prepare them very well, those complexities, and understanding them, but then the environment changes. So I'll give you one example. We started with making an estimate of productivity to build this plant, and then assumed that we need 35,000 people. In the end, the productivity was 50% worse, and we needed 52,000 people. That was not the only complexity also which was changing. There were also concurrent projects happening in the same industrial area. They got delayed by more than a year, and we had assumed that we would get certain disciplines from those projects so that there would be a nice peak shaving, and that didn't happen. For example, as a problem that you can face despite your good preparations.
Despite the workers, other examples of complexities in your process side of the project?
Yeah, the complexity in the process side is because you have many interfaces between the sub-projects. Typically what happens, the first thing that you have to design and build are your utilities. Then meanwhile, the other sub-projects are developing their processes. And they figure out and find out that they need more utilities than you originally had assumed. Then you get a knock-on effect on the design of your utilities, which you also have to build first. So that's a very delicate situation where you don't want to design for overcapacity utilities, because you also need to be, close to your budget. So those things happen typically. It's a risk which is understood, and the mitigations are often there to see whether you can still, add something additionally later by having several building blocks parallel to one another in the utility complex, which we had to do. We had to add another gas turbine later on the project.
How did you deal as a manager with the complexities that you mentioned? How did you manage it, so to say?
Well, first of all, as a manager, you manage those complexities by identifying upfront, particularly as risks. So you see them as risks, and of course you put your mitigations in place to manage those risks. But again, the mitigations might not be sufficient, like I just described about the productivity, which was far more bad than we had expected. Now, it means then as a manager that you will have to face the unexpected. Now, what's important there is that you as a manager can keep your head above the water. So that you as a manager have the capacity to deal with the unexpected. There's not only yourself as a manager, but also when you build your team, you always need to build in your team enough capacity to deal with that, so that people always have the time to look ahead and also have the time to reflect on the mitigations that they need to take if risks develop even worse than they had anticipated them.
Do you have a recommendation for your fellow project managers to better cope with project complexity?
I think as a project manager, like I said a bit earlier, it's key that you have capacity. So one of the things that I did, I always had a young person with me who would help me to deal with the complexities that I was facing, and that created then sufficient capacity in myself, in the doer really, to make sure that we could overcome whatever would be facing us. And you have to stay calm. So if you start to be stressed out, your team will look at you and the whole team will go into a stress mode. Instead of that, they have the capacity and the power to really overcome what they are facing.
That young person, did you use him as a sounding board, or him or her as a sounding board, or as a gopher, or how do I look at it?
I used them in all the aspects that you just mentioned. What's important is when you have a young person with you, they are also often the ears and eyes in the bigger organization. They will pick up signals from 3, 4, 5 levels down of your organization. Also, people will approach them because they feel a bit, it's hard to go almost to the top of the organization in some cases, but then going to a fellow who is of the same age and background as themselves, it helped me to stay in contact also 3, 4 levels down the organization, but also as a gopher and also as a sounding board and also as a learning ground for that person to really build themselves up. But particularly I did it only every 1.5 years I choose someone else. So they move in and out so that for both parties it stays sharp and alive.
What is your main advice for a young starting project manager?
I think my main advice is that pick up a project which is very broad and not big. Don't go on a project solely which is very big and then only do a small part of it. Make it broad. Make it small so it's broad, and then you just hands-on learn the job. Even if you feel that, did I study for that so many years to do this job? What you will learn the first 3 to 5 years of your career is very close to the work front, and it will help you in the decades of project management afterwards. It helped me a lot when I just started with the small projects, installing 2 pumps in the Pernis refinery, 35 years ago.
Perfect thing. Thanks, Rob, for your time and for sharing your experience.